Summertime tips and fun facts from Paul, Kristen, and Dexter at Total Wine & More.
For grilled wings, bring on the barbecue sauce. Pair with Syrah to make your taste buds hot.
It's a great time of year for strawberries in a salad. Enjoy with a crisp cider for a perfect pairing.
Nothing beats recommending a great wine. And with our extensive selection, I can help find the perfect one for your budget.
Whether you're hosting or just bringing the wine, Total Wine & More has you covered with 8,000 wines, 3,000 spirits, and 2,500 beers at always low prices. Cheers!
Never turn my back to the roaches. I'ma need to check on your coach, cause you never know when the enemy approaches. Who do you trust? Tell me, who do you trust? I see him coming at us, but when the Molotov...
Ladies and gentlemen, what episode is this? 220? 219, I think, was 219 was Avengers Forever. We are now heading into a big event right here on the Radulich and Broadcasting Network. It's the Source Material Podcast, ladies and gentlemen.
It's the Battle of Winterfell.
No. Incorrect, sir. Incorrect. Although, I mean, my goodness.
Reference to that musical chairs show.
We got a big event here on the Radulich and Broadcasting Network that we're getting into. So we'll touch on that here in a second, because that's, mainly the first purpose of Mark Radulich's existence is to tell us why we're doing this show. But before we get to that, I want to introduce our guest for this evening. Returning, he helped us out with Avengers Forever last week, and this week he's going to help us out on this Marvel event. It is Chris Armstrong. How you doing, sir?
Doing well. Appreciate you having me.
Oh, man. Well, can't complain. I hear you're bending the ear of Kurt Busiek. I am honored to have you on this show, sir. It is an honor.
We go way back.
Way back. And returning on the Source Material Podcast, he's been on here before. You've heard his voice. His name is Evan Bevins. Evan Bevins, welcome back to Source Material, sir. Are you ready to talk some Skrulls tonight?
I am, as long as you can prove that that's actually you, Jesse.
It is me, sir. It is me. I don't know how I would do that. But I can tell you that, wow, we talked about Skrulls last week. We're talking about Skrulls this week. So, Mark Radulich.
Yes?
This is Secret Invasion. I know we're getting something started with this podcast for the month of May. Why don't you tell our listeners what we're doing and why we did this book?
With the end of the first three phases of the Marvel Cinematic Universe, concluding with Endgame and then epiloguing with Spider-Man: Far From Home, I thought it would be a fun thing to do, as I like to, is to dedicate May as as Marvel Event Month. We did Avengers Forever because of Endgame, the movie, and I thought, okay, well, for the next couple of weeks in the month of May, I thought each source material we would do a different Marvel crossover event. So tonight we're doing Secret Invasion, and then the following week we're doing Civil War 2, much to the chagrin of apparently many of the people I know on Facebook who like to read comics. We were going to do Fear Itself, but apparently my wife has been nominated for a teaching award, and I have to go with her to get to the ceremony.
Oh, husbandly duties.
So you guys are going to be doing blood ties, and I am going to be at an award ceremony.
That's right.
But we are concluding Memorial Day, as a matter of fact. On Memorial Day, we will be concluding Marvel Event Month with one of my favorite crossover events, World War Hulk.
Yeah, you've been itching to do this one for a while, haven't you?
Yeah, I
Just
have.
finding an excuse to do this, and we finally found a spot for it. So,
but for those of you who said, "Hey, wait a minute, Fear Itself," when are you going to do it? I swapped a few things out. I changed some things around. I consulted with the High Lords. I looked to the stars, and I decided that we were going to do Fear Itself around in October, around Halloween.
Oh, okay. All right. Well, that sounds great. I cannot wait to jump in head first in a Marvel event May here. And this is our first big event. This is Secret Invasion, which is a story that I never read up until we did this podcast. So I knew of it. I knew what the plot was, knew some of the big beats that occurred in it, but I did not, I'd never sat down and read the whole thing. And this is one of those big events that touches on the whole Marvel universe. Came out in 2008, ran up until the beginning of 2009, written by one Brian Michael Bendis, pencils by Lionel Francis Yu, and Mark Morales is the inker. So this is the core book. Now, Evan, were you reading this when it was coming out?
Yes, I was buying the Avengers books that led into it. Read a lot of the tie-ins that puts some meat on the bones of the skeleton and story here.
Yeah, this comes out, like I said, in June of 2008. And how far are we removed from Civil War, Evan? You said it was about a year.
Yeah, roughly a year, if I may. The lead-in, the thing that set up Secret Invasion, was I believe the first New Avengers story after Civil War, where they'd split into two teams. The folks that registered went with Iron Man into a new book called Mighty Avengers, and the New Avengers that have been around for a little over 2 years, Spider-Man, Luke Cage.
Is Wolverine one of them?
Wolverine, thank you. I forgot Wolverine. Yeah, Spider-Man, Luke Cage, Wolverine.
Iron Fist.
A few others here and there. Iron Fist, yeah. Iron Fist came along. And Doctor Strange. First time Doctor Strange was an Avenger. He just kind of popped up after that. And it was kind of a flashback showing how they got there. And then somebody on the team remembered, hey, remember Ronan, a.k.a. Echo? Everybody thought Ronan was going to turn out to be Daredevil, but it was character Echo. We left her in Japan fighting the Hand and never gave her any backup. So we should probably go find her.
Okay.
They did. Echo had been killed and resurrected by the Hand, as the Hand does, and she was a little ticked off, so she stabbed Elektra, through the chest with a sword. Mm-hmm. Only when Elektra died, she turned green with a really bumpy chin. And so suddenly everybody was like, oh, so the person who was in charge of Hydra and the Hand wasn't who they were supposed to be.
Dun, dun, dun.
Yeah. Now, this leads directly into our first issue, correct?
Well, there was a little bit more. You had the New Avengers trying to figure out who to trust and trying to verify that they were all who they said they were. At one point, Spider-Woman, if memory serves, flips out and says, we can't keep this to ourselves, and takes the body of the Elektra Skrull to Tony Stark and the official Avengers.
Okay.
Which leads to some bad blood, and that's kind of what put everybody where they were. The New Avengers know something's going on. Tony Stark knows something's going on, and that's where I believe in the first issue you find him and Reed Richards and Hank Pym doing a Skrull autopsy.
Yeah. Skrull autopsy. So, Chris, was this one of those series that you were picking up when it was coming out?
I was big time into all the Marvel stuff, the Avengers stuff, especially around this time. I just recently started working at a comic shop, so even the stuff that I couldn't buy, I would, find a way to read them all. And I was picking up all the issues as they were coming out. Without getting too much into it, all the backstory Evan just went over is one of my issues with this. Going back, this is something that I read 10 years ago. I was reading all the comics back then, and as I was rereading it, I was constantly being like, well, how did they get there?
Okay.
I'm missing something here. And I know it's a story I read in Avengers, 10 years ago, but it's littered with stuff like that, where, the main book, which is supposed to be the brunt of the story, kind of suffers from not having all that stuff spelled out for you.
Okay. There were a couple comments on some of the things that I read about this series. One of which was somebody pointed out, or somebody said there were continuity errors all over it, which I have no idea. Wish I could say that I
were they talking about the heroes that had disappeared, or stuff within the actual storyline, or
it was the end of the arc itself when I saw that comment. So I don't know if they were commenting. They didn't go into specifics. I don't know if they were commenting on the whole arc itself, or they were just commenting on that final issue. One guy said something like the decompression is almost offensive.
Oh, Lord. I was a huge fan of Bendis. Ultimate Spider-Man, I still think it's great. I was reading Powers for a long time. Even to his Avengers run, I really liked. But the more I followed all of his stuff, it became apparent to me that he's really good at coming up with the story, the plot, everything. But the actual scripting of the issues, I have a problem with him. And the decompression, I'm not the first person to say it, but holy shit. Speed it up, man. Don't tell me a story in 8 issues that you could tell in 4 even better.
Oh, wow.
But I'm not that critical of this. As it sounds like I am. But rereading it, there's a lot to like in this comic, and I did enjoy rereading it. But yeah, a lot of the stuff that I have a problem with as far as Bendis is really shines through in this series.
Okay. All right. Mark, now, was this the first time you read this one?
Yes.
Okay. All right. So you weren't picking this up. You knew about it, though, I assume, right?
No.
No? You didn't know anything about Secret Invasion? I mean, you didn't hear anything about it back after the Civil War had hit?
If you're asking me about... I didn't read Civil War when it was contemporary.
Okay.
I read about it after the fact as a trade.
Got it. So then this is all... Everything that happens in this is all complete surprise to you when you were reading it this time through.
I was aware that the whole thing got started with Electra, but that was about it. I think I knew that this also led to Siege, but I didn't remember until I read it, and it led to Siege.
Got it. Well, what I'm going to do here is standard source material format here. I'm going to synopsisize issues 1 through 3, and then really all I'm going to do, ladies and gentlemen, is read the recap at the beginning of each issue. Well, at the beginning of some of the issues to kind of catch you up, and then we'll talk about our favorite moments, our talking points, some things we like, didn't like in between the issues as we go along, and then of course our final thoughts. But Evan is also going to supply us with some details about some extra content because, like I said, this is the core series. It's 8 issues, but there's a lot of tie-ins that kind of, as he said, put the meat on the bones. So, Evan, before I get started, is there anything else you'd like to bring up before I jump into issues 1 through 3?
For the duration of Secret Invasion, the 2 main Avengers titles, Mighty Avengers and New Avengers, a lot of the stories were self-contained flashbacks to kind of elaborate on it. I was trying to remember, I forgot to look up where this series was in relation to when Lost was big on TV. but that's kind of what it felt like, is that, you would read the main issue and then you would go and there would be an issue explaining how this person got there. So Mighty Avengers and New Avengers were supplemental material. So when people seemed to come out of nowhere in Secret Invasion, there was an issue or 2 of an Avengers title telling you what they're doing there.
This was summer of 2008, I think. There were ads. I've got the individual issues when I was rereading it, and there are a lot of ads for Iron Man and Incredible Hulk in there.
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
So it would have probably been written around season 3 of Lost, right in the middle of Lost, pretty much.
And just a little bit prior to the MCU getting started then.
Yeah.
Wow. Interesting. Okay, well, here we go. Our first synopsis goes as such, issues 1 through 3 of Secret Invasion. The shape-shifting alien race known as the Skrulls has begun their invasion of Earth. First, they deployed a well-planned secret invasion using their shape-shifting ability to seed mistrust among the Avengers and other heroes around the world. Now they have struck fast and hard, first coaxing both the sanctioned and underground Avengers to the faraway Savage Land to be hunted by Skrulls posing as their counterparts and long-lost loved ones from an earlier time. Next, Skrull agents posing as humans all over the world act. Dum-Dum Dugan, Agent of S.H.I.E.L.D., Jarvis, Avengers Butler, Captain Marvel, the Kree Warrior, Hank Pym, Founding Avenger, all launch their part of the attack. The invasion has begun with a bang as they send a virus through the mainframe of Stark Tech that shuts down S.H.I.E.L.D. and Iron Man's battle armor. Next, they send the Fantastic Four's Baxter Building into the abyss of the negative zone. Not the whole thing, just a big chunk of it. And capture Reed Richards, enemy of the Skrull state. Finally, a ground assault in the form of thousands of superpowered Skrulls touch down in Manhattan and quickly dispatch the young heroes left from the in-training initiative. The Skrulls start to systematically execute the heroes on TV for the world to see when Nick Fury shows up with a band of new team of Howling Commandos. Back in the Savage Land, Spider-Woman reveals herself to Tony Stark as the Skrull Queen and tells him that he is the greatest sleeper agent in the history of the Skrull Empire. So yeah, that's kind of where we end issue 3, is like, holy crap, Tony Stark? Okay. We see a lot of stuff happen, especially in that first issue. So Mark, let's talk about these first 3 issues, man. I mean, what do you got to say about what you saw? You got any talking points, anything that struck you as like, holy crap? What's your thoughts?
it's so great to see a story like this, which comes right out of like the paranoia of the Cold War and the Red Scare. You know what I mean? This had fucking Salem witch trials written all over it. It's just like you don't know, right? I mean, it's a very practical thing. You have shapeshifters running around. They're not just running around randomly. They have a coordinated, concerted plan to take over Earth, and so everything is possible and everything is plausible and everyone is scared shitless.
Yeah,
and it's great. And I'll tell you, my favorite part of it so far is that bit where Tony, who thinks he's Tony, and like, I you can't tell me I'm somebody else. I know who I am. And she's like, nope, we made it that way so that you would never know who you really were. Because we needed you, you know. And it's like that you have these doubts. Like, did I fucking cause a civil war and the death of Captain America because that was my job? Like, shit, you know, now I don't know anymore. The ultimate weapon in defeating your enemy is causing them to have self-doubt.
Obviously, that's the crux of this whole series, is who do you trust? Actually, I think, wasn't that a tagline?
That was a tagline.
Okay.
And
right.
Ever since they set that up, I mean, I remember reading it, I was trying to guess, okay, who's the Skrull? Who's the Skrull? Going in, I was convinced that Luke Cage was a Skrull.
Really?
Because in New Avengers, he was the one who kept saying, how do we know who to trust? And he was working so hard to hunt the Skrulls, he was making everybody distrust each other. And I'm like, this is the guy that's messing with them. But it turns out Luke Cage is just really enthusiastic.
How crazy was it, right? When all the heroes that looked like they came straight out of the 1980s,
oh, dude,
yeah,
like they just showed up from Secret Wars.
Yeah, I mean, they weren't just randomly selected. That was one of the things I noted. Like, at that point, we knew the Invisible Woman had been replaced. So then here's the Invisible Woman stumbling off the ship, and Mockingbird and Captain America were dead, or are they?
Yep.
And then, you know, oh, by the way, Iron Man's a Skrull too. Well, here's old school Iron Man who, isn't the director of S.H.I.E.L.D. and viewed by a villain by half the heroes in the Marvel Universe.
Man. And wearing his 80s armor.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
I will tell you that this series, granted, I mean, they know what they're doing when they're writing these things. They want to hook you for that next issue. And the endings of, like, I'd say most of the issues throughout this had me going, I've got to read the next one just to find out what happens. That first issue where everybody's pouring out of that ship, I was like, what's going to happen? What is going to, who is it? What's actually happening? I was legitimately going, like, some of these people have got to be real. So, Chris, your thoughts here, man, on issues 1 through 3.
I don't have a whole lot to say about it, really. It's always cool when they can make it back to the Savage Land. We get some dinosaur action, which is the reason their plane crashes initially. The virus, the Skrull virus that's kind of taken over the Stark tech. It's taken over the helicarrier, pretty much technology all over the world and above the world with the Sword space station. It really creates a sense of WTF, how it puts everybody in a really bad spot right off the bat.
Yeah, Iron Man has got, not only is it just his armor, it's like he's got like biomechanics that are being attacked as well. So I mean,
yeah, was this the Extremis armor?
This was post Extremis, yeah.
Okay, and when you think about, look, I've watched enough fantasy movies. I understand Siegecraft now. Okay. And I've watched. I mean, when you think about like how this was written, they really did like kind of follow the pattern of an invasion. First thing they did was take out the infrastructure, and then it goes right back to the whole like, well, Tony was a sleeper agent, right? It's just like, okay, this guy will rise to prominence. He will single-handedly rebuild our infrastructure, make the entire planet utterly dependent on him and his technology, and then we're gonna narf it.
No, Evan, help me out here, because even though I've talked about the Skrulls, it feels like ad nauseum here for on the past few podcasts. The only Skrull that I know that can like duplicate powers is the Super Skrull.
Right.
Is that what we have here? Is like a bunch of Super Skrulls, or is this some other? Go ahead.
Yeah, you do have a bunch of Super Skrulls, especially when they crash in Manhattan, and that was just one of the cool geek moments. Is looking at these big spreads and figuring out whose powers were put together in which Super Skrulls.
Oh yeah.
So, but those weren't the ones who were doing the infiltration, because as they touched on, I mean, Wolverine could smell a Skrull. Mr. Fantastic had all kinds of devices that could detect him. Doctor Strange could. Professor X could read their minds. So, and that's what some of the tie-ins and flashbacks did, was went through how they figured out how to counter each of those methods. A lot of them, the ones who were the really deep cover ones, couldn't just shapeshift back. And although I think in some of them there was some inconsistency about whether they could or couldn't. But the thing I was wondering when I was reading this, I did try to tweet Bendis, but apparently he's not as responsive as Kurt Busiek. There was a story, and I don't remember how many years earlier, but I want to say about 7 or 8 years earlier, when Alan Davis was writing X-Men and Uncanny X-Men. Mm-hmm. And it was 2 titles, but it was basically just a bi-weekly series. The story went from one to the other back and forth, where the X-Men had gone to some other dimension. They're supposed to be teleported home, and they wind up in New York City, but there's like 3 moons overhead. And it turned out they were on this moon of the Skrull throne world, and there were all these Skrulls masquerading as heroes based on the news broadcasts that they had received from Earth. And it was a training ground for exactly what Secret Invasion turned out to be.
Wow.
And I don't know. I always kind of wondered, and this isn't to disparage Alan Davis or Brian Bendis, but the idea of Skrulls pretending to be a bunch of people en masse isn't in and of itself that crazy of an idea. So I don't know if Bendis built on that or if it was just a case of great minds thinking alike, but I went back and read those issues, and it kind of holds up.
Chris, you got any comments on the Thunderbolts here? Because they kind of make an appearance in our first 3 issues.
Yeah, they were at this time. That was the Suicide Squad version of the Thunderbolts, where they were criminals who were basically working for the government. Norman Osborn had fallen ass backwards into the head of, well, I forget how, but he was in charge.
Civil War shenanigans.
Yeah. So it was cool. It's always cool for me to see Songbird and some of the other Thunderbolts characters show up. I guess her and Moonstone may have been the only original Thunderbolts in that lineup. I can't remember. It's been so long since I've read those. But yeah, another thing from these first 3 issues. We're doing the first 3, right?
Yeah, the first 3
right now. It's cool to see the Young Avengers in action. They had become really popular a few years before this. We don't really see them anymore.
No, you don't.
But it was cool to see them kind of spotlighted. And then the final issue of issue 3, when Fury shows up with the cable gun and the Secret Warriors, is a big. It's a nice cliffhanger.
The cable gun, yeah, pretty much. I mean, these Super Skrulls, I'm looking them over. I'm looking at that. How many 2-page splashes can you have? I mean, there are just so many throughout this book. It seemed like, and it was beautiful. I mean, don't get me wrong. I loved it because not only did it make it an easier read, but the action just kind of popped off the charts here. But I'm looking at that battle between the Young Avengers and the combination of the Super Skrulls here. Evan, do you have those pages in front of you? There's one that looks like they just took all the X-Men and shoved them all together in one scroll. You got like Cyclops beam, Colossus armor, and then Wolverine's claws coming out of this one single scroll. I don't know if that's a Dr. Octopus clone back there, but I mean, they are just we got a giant scroll, just all sorts of craziness going on. And nobody's, it's nice to see Fury show up with these Howling Commandos, which, by the way, I have no idea who's on that team.
Well, would you like me to go there?
Yes, sir, please.
Mighty Avengers number, I think it was 13. I've got the trade here. Was that whole issue, and it was done by Alex Maleev, that did a lot of Daredevil stuff with Bendis. Did the art. That was Fury recruiting the Secret Warriors, or the new Howling Commandos, whatever you want to call them. They were what he called caterpillars. They were people he knew had powers that weren't on S.H.I.E.L.D.'s radar or Hydra's radar or anybody, so he reasoned they weren't on the Skrulls' radar.
Ah, okay.
And so the first one was Quake, Daisy Johnson, who was introduced in Bendis's first big non-Daredevil thing for Marvel, Secret War, which had nothing to do with original Secret Wars or more recent Secret Wars.
I remember it. I read that. I know what you're talking about.
So, yeah, Daisy Johnson, and then he sent her to get, the kid is Phobos, the son of Ares, Hercules' brother, who was in Mighty Avengers.
Yep.
And therefore he's the god of fear. It's a 10-year-old who can just look at people and send them running and losing bladder control. Let's see, Slingshot, aka Yo-Yo. If you watch Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., she's been a main character on there for a while, alongside Daisy.
Okay.
If you don't watch Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., she's still been on there, but you may not know who she is. Then there was a guy, I think he went by Hellfire. He's the grandson of the original Ghost/Phantom Rider.
Oh.
Who can somehow make a chain light up with Hellfire and works at a gas station in Georgia. And then Dr. Druid's kid.
Okay. Now, I noticed they kept calling him Druid. I think it was Druid.
Yes.
And I was like, is that the he looks awful young. I was like, wait a second.
He's Dr. Druid's son. So Dr. Druid was the guy you got when you couldn't get Doctor Strange.
Yep.
And then when he died and you couldn't get Doctor Strange, you went and found his kid who, like, he had, I think the magic was genetic with him.
Okay.
Sometime when I don't want to get off on a tangent, we can talk about Dr. Druid's really racist origin.
Oh, boy. So, now, who was the big bald guy again?
Oh, the big bald guy. I forgot about him. Sledge. And he was... I don't remember Sledge, what his pedigree was. But yeah, that was him. I think he went by Sledge.
Okay.
And those guys spun off into the series that Bendis did with Jonathan Hickman, Secret Warriors.
Okay. Never
and
read
most
that.
of them you don't hear from anymore.
Okay.
I think somebody mentioned, or maybe that was my notes, it starts really fast, but to kind of go back to what Chris said, as I went to issue 3 and even in some of the ones we haven't gotten to yet, everybody kind of stayed in the same place for a while. I mean, I liked the story, but some of the pacing in the middle kind of dragged, like a Marvel Netflix show.
It kind of got a little redundant there.
Yeah.
The other thing that jumped out at me was just that thing in Times Square where you had all the young characters like from the Initiative. That was brutal. I mean, and then you had some of those young people getting pretty brutal back with the Skrulls.
Oh yeah, dude. I mean, you look whoever I don't think that's Vision. That's in the Young Avengers, right? Or is it Vision?
It is. It's. Let me see if I can remember this.
It looks just like Vision, but
it's Iron Lad who turned out to be a young Kang.
Yeah, we talked about this last week.
It's like his brain patterns in the Vision's body.
Oh boy.
So, and he was dating Scott Lang's daughter,
Stature.
Which is just really weird. Yeah, it's like the body of the Scarlet Witch's ex-husband and a nearly immortal Time Lord is dating Scott Lang's 15-year-old daughter, and she called him Jonas, which I always thought was a reference to the Jonas Brothers, but that could be way off. But yeah, I remember I actually wrote in my notes as I was reading this, man, Vision dies so much.
I thought he was dead for good. I was like, oh my gosh, but
I think 2 issues later he's up and running around
exactly.
again.
He's alive and he's fine. There's only one casualty, I think, that I read from the wiki, and that was some dude, I can't even remember his name, but he was a member of the Initiative, I think. Yeah. And he died, so.
Yeah, and I got all excited because on the recap page for issue 3, they had Annex. I remember years ago, Marvel, all their annuals were a big event, and there was one year that they had annuals that were bagged with trading cards of new characters, and one of the ones I got was Annex. And I imagine I've read at least 3 of the dozen comics or so he's appeared in, and so it actually, in this issue and several times, even though he made the recap page, he's just like kind of standing there looking dumbfounded or, oh crap, I'm about to die. But I was still excited because it's Annex.
Hey, it's Annex.
So, but yeah, as far as those first 3 issues, I mean, I liked everything that they were doing, but it just, stuff seemed to kind of drag for a while, and that's where I didn't really notice it as much when I was reading it because I was reading all these tie-ins monthly. Like some of the tie-ins elaborate on some of what goes on in the Savage Land, or there's tie-ins that explain like how certain people got replaced. Like they show exactly when Spider-Woman got replaced and when Hank Pym got replaced, and some stuff that the Hank Pym Skrull did that set up things later in the story. So that reading them all together, even though I enjoyed it kind of felt like it stalled sometimes because you didn't have all those tie-ins or lost flashback building out the story.
Mark, was Spider-Woman a big deal for you when you found out she was a Skrull? Because almost like it was kind of buried. I mean, it didn't seem like it was that big of a deal in these issues, but I remember hearing like that was kind of like the big thing. But anyway, I mean, the reveal of her being a Skrull.
To me, it felt like what obscure character can we use in this role?
Okay.
Like what character's not doing much these days?
The Skrull Queen.
Oh, and she wasn't. I mean, when she and Luke Cage made it onto the Avengers, you were like, wait, what? And part of it was because Bendis just loves those characters. If Bendis never wrote for Marvel, most of the Netflix shows wouldn't be there because he created Jessica Jones. Nobody cared about Luke Cage until he started putting him in everything, or people hadn't cared for a long time. And then, where Luke goes, Iron Fist follows.
Well, let's hop into issues 4 and 6. The shape-shifting alien race known as the Skrulls has invaded Earth. Hey, that sounds like exactly what I just said. Setting up camp and making their intentions clear. The Earth is now part of the Skrull Empire. Even though they've escaped the traps set for them, Earth's heroes, including the Avengers, have been defeated both mentally and physically. They didn't even know the extent of the invasion or which of them was or could be a Skrull agent until they got back to New York, where the Skrull Queen, disguised as Spider-Woman, believes she has established a foothold. Now the heroes are regrouping. Reed Richards has discovered a way to see past the Skrulls' genetic shape-shifting, and the humans can now tell who is who for the first time in possible years. The mighty Thor has signaled both the humans and Skrulls to do battle on the fields of Central Park, and the Hood has arrived with an army of villains to fight for Earth. For the first time in years, the original Avengers are united, and Nick Fury is back on the battlefield. And for the first time ever, heroes and villains fight as one, all against the collective army of the Skrulls. We have some pretty big events happen through in issues 4 through 6. Getting the battle started, because the next two issues, the final two issues, is pretty much the battle. Mark, issues 4 through 6, anything that you can think of that sticks out in your mind?
Yeah, okay. I think it's the middle part where I feel like it's just a lot of fighting and the story wasn't really progressing. I think overall, I like the story. I like the idea of it. It's like we talk about with a lot of the Marvel movies. While I'm entertained by it, there are problems. And one of the problems is, like I said, the middle doesn't seem to go anywhere. It's like after the Skrull Queen tries to convince Tony that he's a sleeper agent, I just feel like they change locations and there's a lot of fighting, but the plot doesn't really go anywhere. Mm-hmm. Then the last two issues, when they start to resolve things, the narrative action for me picks back up again. Yeah.
Well, there's a couple big events that I had listed here, especially in that first issue 4. One of the big things is Captain Marvel. This is Carol Danvers shows up.
This is before everyone hated her.
And when she was Ms. Marvel.
Ms. Marvel. Okay, thank you. Yes, it's Ms. Marvel. So she shows up to give some assistance there. She's trying to help out Fury and his commandos. And as she's trying to help them out, like Fury doesn't even believe it's her. And whips out a gun as they're getting ready to leave and shoots her. And she flies back into a bunch of Skrulls and they proceed to put a beat down on her. And they leave. Like Nick Fury and the commandos leave her. So nobody could figure out who to trust. Like you're starting to see that, okay, well that person might be a Skrull, that person's not. I'm not taking any chances. Boom, Captain Marvel or Miss Marvel is in trouble because Fury doesn't believe she is saying who she is.
In Fury's defense, I did not read the Ms. Marvel tie-ins, but she was at some point in this replaced by a Skrull. One of the cool things, I don't know if you guys have ever heard of the game HeroClix, a collectible miniatures game.
I have, yeah.
They did a Secret Invasion set that came out right alongside the comics, and there were several figures in there that were sculpted as Skrulls, and you didn't know until you turned the dial whether they were a Skrull or the real character.
Oh, interesting.
And so Ms. Marvel was one of those.
Oh, very cool.
And
very
so
cool.
I don't know. I didn't read her tie-in, but I do know at some point she was replaced, so that may have been why Fury was so cold with her. I'm not sure about that one, but I do know that she got replaced. Not as long as Pym and some of the others, but she was replaced at some point.
That makes sense. Mark, I want you to tell me about what your thoughts are on Clint and Mockingbird, because that gets resolved, I think, in this one where she comes off the ship and Clint hasn't seen her in forever. He believes that she is who she says she is. And then I think at the end of it's either issue 6 or 5, one of those, you find out that she's actually a Skrull.
It's all a sham.
It is all champagne, sir.
It's everyone that came off that ship was a big red herring.
Yeah.
I believe that's the name of the ship. They got off the USS Red Herring.
What'd you think, man? I mean, Clint was enraged, dude. It was Clint, right? This is Clint Barton we're talking about.
It was Clint, yes.
He was dressed as, is that Ronan? Or
Ronan.
Okay.
Yeah, because there was a whole thing. He had been dead for a while, and he came back, and he hooked up with the Scarlet Witch, who didn't remember him, and she's also the one who killed him. So he didn't really feel like being Hawkeye at that point in time. Okay. So, and they just had the Ronin costume laying around because they left Echo over in Japan, and they were like, "Oh, hey, you can wear this."
Okay, all right. So, Mark, I'm sorry I cut you off there, man. You got any big thoughts there?
I mean, just that it's a hell of a thing for the character to go through. Like, say something that would, that only Bobby would know, and and she says 2 + 2 = 5, and he was like, "That's right, only you would say that," And so she's
that was dramatic, wasn't it? Everybody was just on pins and needles to figure out if she knew the math equation.
Yeah. Say something that'll convince me that you're who you say you are. Newport News. All right.
It's my wife.
There she is. So and then it turns out that he got suckered.
Yeah, and he is pissed. I mean, he is pissed. Evan, the other big thing I think I've got written down here is Thor's return. Is this Thor coming back from him being? I remember him being gone during Civil War. Is this his first appearance back?
There was a Thor Secret Invasion tie-in that I didn't read, but yeah, this is the first time he had really done a lot with the Avengers. Okay. I want to say that they did a Ragnarok story and Asgard ended and then came back, as it does. His hammer dropped in the desert, reminiscent of that first Thor movie. But so yeah, Thor had been out of commission for a while. Bucky had been Captain America for a while, but hadn't really been involved with the Avengers. So this was kind of a return of the classic team.
Okay.
So this bit with Thor, is this when he establishes Asgard in Oklahoma?
Yes.
Okay, I read some of that run.
Yeah. And if I can, if you don't mind me jumping back on Hawkeye, because that was one of the things that not only stood out to me when I was rereading it, but the first time I read this, I understand him being ticked, and then he just goes out and absolutely murders some Skrulls, and he has that, this doesn't end until every last one of them dies. You hear me? Every bleeping last one of them, and that always kind of bugged me because I mean, here we are, we have the Avengers, who the Vision, by golly, he's a man, he's a living being, and he's a toaster that blows up every couple of months and we fix him, but he lives. But suddenly the Skrulls are like, let's just kill him. I mean, I don't even know if Spider-Man once goes, hey, maybe we shouldn't. And I mean, I understand it's war and everything, but it was just it's like, all these heroes who have these lofty ideals, and it's like, let's just kill them all.
Well, Chris, we're talking issues 4 through 6.
Yeah, I guess I'll just sum up with the return of Thor here. Kind of encapsulates one of the problems I have with this event and kind of like modern comics in general, because Thor comes back. It's a big deal that Thor's back, but nowhere in any of these issues did they say, here's why Thor hasn't been around. This is what Thor's been doing. Was he supposed to be dead at this point? Is that why?
He had been for a while, but
right. But like, there's nothing really
right.
That's really all I've got for these 4 issues. It's a great 2 back-to-back, just unbelievable 2-page spreads from you. The assemble shot with all of the heroes running into battle, and then the big conflict on the last 2 pages before we get to the penultimate, I guess, issue where it's just constant war. Nice Galactus Skrull thrown in there into the background.
Yeah, I had that one. Written down. Was it Stature versus Galactus on that one?
I've been the one that's kind of the negative Nancy here, kind of bashing this event, but these next 2 issues, it kind of turns around for me.
Some of these spreads were just unreal. I know and the last 2 issues again. This reminds me of when we talked Avengers Forever. We had some tremendous battles going down there. All right, there, Evan. What do you got for me here for issues 4 through 6?
I was about to work in my obligatory Squirrel Girl reference. She actually
You're
didn't show
contracted for one per show.
she didn't show up, but they actually did a story a while ago where she and her associates were helping a Skrull who was stranded on Earth after Secret Invasion, and who was like, I understood you guys were defending your planet, but instead of like, hey, let's repel the invaders, it was, hey, everybody, let's murder us some Skrulls. And I was like, thank you, Ryan North, for addressing that for me 10 years later.
Yeah, I did take notice of that. They were pretty willy-nilly just murdering sentient life forms left and right.
Well, there's no good Skrull like a dead Skrull. That's what my pappy always said.
And it makes sense for like Bucky Cap and the Thunderbolts and Wolverine, but there's a part where Iron Man blows up somebody's head, Luke Cage punches a Skrull and his eye pops out. But the other thing that jumped out at me that I thought was really cool that they were building up and it just kind of landed with a dud was right before they get to the big fight. I think the Queen says, "Remember, he loves you," and Spider-Man finally goes, "Who?" And she says, "God." And I'm like, huh. So the Skrulls have a concept of God similar. That's and then that was it. Now,
there's no follow-up, really.
Well, I Googled that, and another tie-in I didn't read, but at that point, Hercules had taken over the Hulk's book. It was called Incredible Hercules, and so there was a storyline where Hercules and members of the various Earth pantheons were fighting the Skrull gods. Apparently, one of them in there was the he they were talking about. So, I don't know. I didn't read that one, but yeah, I suddenly got off on this tangent like, oh man, so the Skrulls believe in God like we do. Obviously, one planet is seriously misinterpreting his will here, or maybe both of them, as people tend to do. But then it was just like, we're just going to punch and blow each other up.
Let's take a look I'm looking at this Avengers Assemble page. All right. I see Penance. Penance is back there. Ares,
poor Robbie.
Poor Robbie Baldwin. So what's up with Ares? Can you tell me a little bit about Ares here? He's always been a character that seemed to have been thrust in this era.
He wandered in from a Wonder Woman book?
Yeah, kind of. He popped up. I don't know where he was before this. I mean, way, way long ago, he was a villain in some Avengers stories. And I think somebody must have done something with him, and Bendis plucked him in for Mighty Avengers, I guess because they felt like they needed a god and Thor wasn't around, and Hercules was mad at him. He was kind of the arrogant jerk like Thor was before he got to be nicer. He was basically a good guy, but he was pretty ruthless.
Okay. He ends up meeting his end not too long after this, doesn't he? Doesn't he get killed?
That was in Siege, yeah.
Okay. We have Sentry in here, by the way, which he is... they play with, like, I don't know if it's in this 3 issues, but the previous 3 issues, but they kind of like play with his madness a little bit. The Skrulls kind of mess with his head a little bit, but that seems to go nowhere. So is that something that happens in the side books?
Yeah, they did one issue that focused entirely on Sentry, where the Jarvis Skrull read his file and figured out that the key to beating him is the Void, which is the villain that's also the Sentry, and he said if you're in a bind with him, just shapeshift to the Void, it'll freak him out, and which is basically what it did. In one of the tie-ins, one of the Skrulls in the Savage Land shapeshifts his face to be the Void and said, "Hey, Bob, you did this all. We're working for you." And Sentry freaks out and flies off, and by the time he stops, he's at Saturn.
Oh, jeez.
I've done that before.
Yeah, well, it happens to the best of us. I'm sorry. Well, one other quote that I thought was funny that has a cool backstory. That one of them, I think it's the Queen. I don't remember exactly where it is. Mr. Fantastic is saying, "You killed my family. You're not here to save us. It's all lies. You're here to punish us." And the Queen responds, "Well, you should have thought of that before you found it funny to turn our brothers into cows."
Not for nothing, she's not wrong.
Well, in the first Skrull appearance, which was like Fantastic Four #2, that's what Reed Richards does. He hypnotizes the Skrulls and they shapeshift into cows.
Yep.
And they hang around. Well, somewhere in the 90s, Mark Miller and Grant Morrison decided to revisit that with a comic called Skrull Kill Crew.
Yes, you've talked about this before on other podcasts with me. I remember you talking about these guys. Go ahead.
They were people who, at some point, the Skrull cows got ground up into hamburger.
Oh, jeez.
and these people ate them at a fast food chain and got weird powers and could see Skrulls. And so there was actually a subplot in The Initiative, which was, the book about all the superheroes they were training.
Okay, hold on. So these guys, the people that eat the Skrull meat can become like Roddy Piper, and they live. And he can, with the glasses, they can see Skrulls.
Yes.
Okay, all right, continue.
And so the Initiative, which actually is my favorite Secret Invasion tie-in, one of their members, 3D Man, because that's a thing, hooks up with the Skrull kill crew. Well, you have these two big battles in the main story in Savage Land and then New York. What's left of the Initiative is going all over the U.S. trying to stop all the other stuff the Skrulls are doing.
Okay.
And it's these, fifth-rate heroes, either that were made just for the comic, like Spinner. I won't spoil it, but, man, Spinner was only in, like, 3 issues, and she's my favorite part of Secret Invasion. And like Devil Slayer, who was the thing back in the 70s, 3D Man, and it's all these third-tier heroes or new learning to be heroes that are out doing damage control all over the country.
Okay, that's pretty cool. I mean, I know you've talked about that series. Or is it a series that they came up with, or was it called?
Yes, Skrull Kill Crew with a K. Mid-90s. I've got the first issue here somewhere. I found it in a dollar bin, and I was like, I have to own at least one of these. This is the weirdest concept I've ever seen. And then at some point, they did a trade, the complete Skrull Kill Crew, that was the original series, their storyline in The Initiative and Secret Invasion, and then another series they did with them right after Secret Invasion.
Okay. All right. Yeah, we actually not too long ago just talked about the cows that Reed Richards hypnotized when we did Kree Skrull War. That was actually a big part of that. I can't remember if it was just the one that was left, because there were supposedly 4 Skrulls, but we only see 3 at the end of that, 3 that were turned into cows, and then the other one becomes like, a high politician, shapeshifting agent. All right, well, let's get into issues 7 through 8, the last 2 issues of Secret Invasion. For the first time in years, the original Avengers are united, and Nick Fury is back on the battlefield, and for the first time ever, heroes and villains fight as one, backing the collective army of Skrulls up against the wall. That's right, we've got them up against the wall. As a last resort, the Skrulls unveil their backup plan. Janet Van Dyne, a.k.a. the Wasp. Months ago, the Skrull posing as Hank Pym tainted her growth serum with an airborne toxin that could only be triggered by Hank himself, which he does with his dying breath. Helplessly, her friends watch as the Wasp becomes a chemical bomb, a giant chemical bomb that will take out Skrull and human alike. Because if the Skrulls can't have Earth, no one can. So that is... Go ahead.
So I have a question.
Yes, sir.
Here we have yet another woman who has been viciously attacked in comic books. What did Gail Simone have to say about this?
Oh, no. Well, I'm sure...
Is this not an example of fridging, which I just learned about today?
It's called fridging?
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh.
Is this so? I'm being like halfway serious here. Is this a fridging moment for good old Miss Watts? Because they could have written that anyway, where they sabotaged any character to blow up or poison everybody or whatever. They chose her in particular.
She's the one using that power set. Plus, she's probably the one closest to Hank Pym. So
yeah, and that didn't come out of nowhere. I want to say. I don't have it right in front of me, but back in Mighty Avengers #2, I remember that scene where he gives her the new formula, and you're just like, oh, okay, well, there's Hank, and he's apparently making out with Tigra, and he gave the Wasp a new growth formula. So, okay, whatever.
I was wondering if that is something that had actually happened, was documented in another comic.
Yeah, they showed it in a flashback, but yeah, it was in one of the early issues of Mighty Avengers. I remembered that scene. When it happened, I was like, oh, okay, so that's why we had that happen. Because I think Wasp had already been big before.
Well, okay, so here we have this. She's the bomb. So the Wasp is giant, and she continues to grow, and she's going to take out the whole army. So the only person that is able to, I guess, put an end to it is Thor. Thor, I can't say that it's very explicit. When I say explicit, I can't tell what he does. I just know supposedly he kills her.
Yeah.
I mean, it doesn't look like she just continues to grow and Thor's spinning his hammer and then that's kind of it. I mean, was I missing anything?
I had to look at that several times to figure out. I think he kind of like sucked her up in a cosmic whirlwind.
So Thor takes out Janet. You know, she gets too big for her britches, and Thor has to take her out. Now, the next big piece on the board here is the Skrull Queen. She actually gets taken out by Norman Osborn, who takes the shot with this like sniper rifle and just blows her away. And of course, other heroes are taking out Skrull ships. And putting an end to this invasion. Tony Stark flies up and finds one filled with heroes that had been replaced and brings that one back to Earth, including among those passengers or captives, one Mockingbird and also Sue Storm. Now, as a result of all this, after all is said and done, as we hit this final issue, Tony Stark shield being compromised by that virus, the president of the United States puts another person in charge of pretty much our defense. That is the head of the Thunderbolts, Norman Osborn. So out of Secret Invasion, we have Norman Osborn taking basically the world in his hands now. So it's some bad news. Kind of where we leave it, where Norman Osborn goes downstairs into the basement and apparently has like, I don't know who all was there.
They called him the Cabal. It was Doctor Doom, the Hood, Emma Frost, Namor, and Loki, who was a lady now.
Oh, Lady Loki. That's Namor? Yeah, okay, that's Namor. And yeah, these are some pretty big villains who now are who Norman Osborn, gosh, this guy, fell ass backwards. You ain't kidding there, Chris.
Why was Loki a girl?
Reasons.
Okay.
He had died, right?
Yeah, I think everybody in Asgard died, and if I'm not mistaken, that's Sif's body.
Okay. I liked having the female Loki for a while. I thought that they changed that too quickly. It was only like a year or two, I think.
Yeah.
But it was an interesting angle for a while.
All right, so I got a few things about these issues I'll go ahead and bring up. Chris, we did Avengers Forever. It's good to see the Trinity back on the field here. We have Iron Man, Captain America, and Thor in this event. Were you happy, sir?
Yeah, issue 7 is like the highlight. It's just kind of it's probably a 32-page action sequence. And Lionel Yu really knocks it out of the park. It's not the real Captain America. It's Bucky Cap.
Oh, this is Bucky Cap?
That's Bucky Cap.
I was going to ask him, like he makes a face at like Tony or something, and I'm like, wait a minute, weren't you gone for the whole Civil War? What are you pissed off about?
No, he's still dead at this point.
Oh, okay.
So that's Bucky Barnes. One of the big moments from that issue is, although it doesn't necessarily make sense in retrospect, Iron Fist and Spider-Man are talking, and Spider-Man's like, "Hey, the Watcher's not here, so this can't be that big of a deal."
Yes.
And then next panel, there's the Watcher overlooking, the battlefield.
I think Spider-Man might have actually done like oh, come on.
I'm not sure that in the end this really warrants having the Watcher there, but it's a good joke, so whatever.
One what if where Norman Osborn being in charge leads to the end of the world, so it could be.
Yeah, that's true, but almost every, battle can be a what.
Yeah.
The characters don't see the Watcher really outside of like the Infinity Gauntlet and a few other like huge cosmic stories that I can remember. It's happened. I guess it's happened a few times more recently. This is probably the first time it's in modern comics that characters like acknowledge that he's there. I would think that he would want to not be seen so as not to affect the outcome. Yeah, the second issue, I think it suffers quite a bit from the narration and the action at the beginning. It kind of gives you the sense that it's already been resolved. It's people talking about it after the fact, which kind of hurts the suspense a little. I mean, obviously we all know the good guys are going to win, or at least the Skrulls are going to lose. Mm-hmm. In this case, maybe the good guys didn't necessarily win. That kind of goes towards what I think is one of the big problems with this, is that it's just a setup for the next phase of Marvel Comics, which is the Dark Reign stuff with Norman Osborn as the head of S.H.I.E.L.D., etc.
How far are we? Because one of the big complaints, you'll hear a lot of us talk about the newer stuff is the event fatigue that we go through.
Mm-hmm. Well, this is when the event cycle was the shortest it ever has been. Every summer, basically, there was a new event.
Mm-hmm. There was something big coming out. I'm trying to place what came. I know we talked about Civil War happening before this.
You had Civil War was the event, and then most stuff after that was branded with the Initiative.
Okay.
Was across the top of a lot of stuff, and then that built into Secret Invasion. And then after Secret Invasion, Dark Reign was the branding until Siege came along. And Siege led into, was it Age of Heroes?
Oh, yeah.
That sounds
which
right.
was supposed to be brighter and more optimistic, and it happened for like an issue or two.
I want to point out, I like the Dark Reign stuff a lot. I really like the Avengers Initiative stuff a lot. I think that the way Marvel handled a lot of these events, I would say they were short-sighted. I think that most of these look like everything is so insular. Like, people who are reading these, going back and reading this now, if they weren't reading comics 10 years ago, who the hell are the Young Avengers? Mm-hmm. Who the hell are these people in the Initiative? Like, it's characters nobody would recognize.
Yeah, I recognize the Young Avengers, but as for the Initiative, I was going through some of those members, and I was like, Diamondback? What? Wait, who? I knew who Diamondback was, but I was like, I didn't even remember anything about this team. Hardly any. I didn't know Hank Pym was supposedly the head of it. Yeah. So this is all flew under the radar for me.
It was a heck of a series. I mean, Dan Slott actually wrote the first 12 issues, I think.
Oh, wow. Okay.
And then I can't remember if it was, don't tag them in this on Twitter, if it was Christos Gage or Christopher Yost.
Okay.
Don't tag them together. You have to make
I can't remember which of them followed up. Like I said, the Initiative was my favorite Secret Invasion tie-in. It dealt with a lot of, a lot of new characters in the Marvel Universe. But you're right, if you didn't read that, it was a fun series, but not a lot endured beyond that. Not a lot of those characters and storylines carried on.
Same with the Secret Warriors. Like, those are characters as far as I know, I don't read everything, but I don't think that they're really relevant anymore.
Quake shows up every once in a while. I think Drew had made an appearance in Avengers before Secret Wars, but and then of course Quake and Yo-Yo are on. Quake and Yo-Yo being on Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. is probably the most enduring thing from Secret Warriors.
Mark, what'd you think of Jessica Jones hopping in here and then all of a sudden seeing Jarvis, the guy that she just left, her young baby? They got a girl, right?
Yeah. Who grows up to be Captain America in one timeline.
Oh, okay. Young girl leaves the young girl. She just left this young girl with Jarvis at her building. I mean, what do you think of that part there, Mark?
So first of all, as a parent, yikes.
Yeah.
I was like, oh no.
We momentarily lost my daughter at Hollywood Studios, like when they put up their Osborne lights. Speaking of Osborne's, like, she only got like a few feet in front of us, and like we found her immediately. But there was that moment of like, holy shit, we've lost her in a crowd, And I'm like Shazam. I didn't just leave the park and come back, and start a new life. You have to.
I understood that reference.
Yay! But yeah, like this, the what a horrible moment for Jessica Jones, who you can't blame her. There's no way to sort of interpret that and go, oh well, she should have thought about it. No fucking way. You're in the Jarvis. It's Jarvis. You're in the moment, and unless you're like super paranoid, you're not going to assume he's a Skrull. And so, it's like, and he's doing what he's there for. Like, he's there to take care of the things that need to be taken care of.
He washes the dishes. Why would the Skrulls want to take him over?
Right.
Exactly.
Right. They didn't infiltrate like Bob's house. It was, they were only taking out certain superheroes. And so when she realizes what she's done, and did they ever resolve that?
They did. I forgot how they resolved it. So while we were waiting to link up on Skype, I busted out that trade, and they had the baby back in 2 issues.
But I mean, that happened like right at the end of the thing. It wasn't.
It wasn't in this series.
I'm like, I don't remember. Yeah, I remember like, holy shit, and then it was like, and then the trade was over. Mm-hmm. I'm like, okay, did I miss something? Okay, so yeah, that I mean, did I? I mean, as far as the other stuff about Jessica Jones, it was fun to see her in her whatever the hell her superhero costume when all the decoys got out of the USS Red Herring. That was fun, and then to see her just like, oh, I gotta get in there. Here, just take the baby for a minute, and then whoosh, it was gone. Horrible.
Yeah.
Like a good read, like definitely get your blood going, but as just relating to it, it was like, oh god, that's horrible.
Thor is still pissed off at Tony. What is this about, Evan? Is this all Civil War stuff, or what's going on?
Yeah, I mean, Civil War. He obviously didn't agree with. He didn't take Tony's side in that. He wasn't around for it. But if you remember in Civil War, the straw that broke the camel's back was when their crappy Thor clone killed Bill Foster.
Yeah.
So it's like, not only is he like, oh man, you screwed up the Avengers. You got
inadvertently
killed.
Yeah.
And you made a puppet Thor that killed Bill Foster, who everybody likes.
Yeah, I abhor what thou hast become, and I'm sure I will not be the only one who finds the blame in all this to fall square on thy shoulders.
You know what's funny? I think so. Kevin Feige and a lot of the producers of the Marvel Cinematic Universe had to have been sitting around with like a bunch of Iron Man comics and going, "What characterization of Iron Man do we want to run with? Let's run with the Civil War version. The one that keeps trying to figure out how to solve the world's problems." And fucks it up to her fairly well every step of the way. Like, this iteration of Tony is the Marvel Cinematic Universe Tony.
Yeah.
Sure.
Can we talk about the big cameo appearance that I can't believe no one's touched on yet? Okay, well, you got a bunch of Skrulls that look like the Invisible Woman attacking Mr. Fantastic. The Secret Warriors help him. Wolverine, the Hood. And then, as the Skrull Queen is strangling a bloodied Iron Fist, we see a Super Skrull with Dr. Octopus tentacles fighting Howard the Duck.
Oh, that's right. Somebody actually commented on that. Yeah, I see him.
So there's a Blade movie that's in like pre-production right now. Possibly it's in the next slate of Marvel Phase 4 movies. Can we get a Blade Howard the Duck team up?
What?
That's what the world is waiting for.
I think they're putting Howard's eggs, so to speak, in the animated basket with the Kevin Smith.
You're right.
I sincerely hope they get Seth Green to voice him, though.
That would be cool.
You're absolutely right about that. Now I'm bummed because I need a crossover between Howard the Duck and Detective Chimp.
So
I would totally watch that, read that, whatever it is.
You can also see Howard in the Avengers Assemble splash pages too.
Oh man,
is he in there? I didn't know that. So yeah, the comment here says, "Did you see Howard the Duck kicking ass?" Okay, the Skrull had him by the throat, but that's just where Howard wants him.
He is a master at quack foo. I should have said this earlier in the podcast. I just want to get it out there. Well, when they blast Reed Richards, ugh, gross.
Oh, when he gets right there at the beginning?
When he looks like plastic snot, yeah.
I will interject one more thing. When Reed and Sue show up looking for their kids, and Johnny and Ben are there arguing over which button to push, that's a really funny scene and a nice interaction between those two, but no explanation for where they've been this whole time. Just a couple of lines of dialogue.
There was a limited series, but yeah, right. You're right. If you're not reading that, you got no clue.
Oh, see, that's
I assumed we were watching the kids. They were just like looking out the window, like, "Huh, that battle looks terrible. Here, Franklin, it's time for your nap."
They were stuck in the negative zone.
Were they?
Yeah.
Oh, I knew that the Sue walks in. Skrull Sue walks in and then unleashes the negative zone portal or black hole, blue hole, whatever the hell it is.
By the way.
Yeah, it's like this huge bubble taking out a big portion of that building. So yeah, you see Johnny like yell and turn into the Human Torch, and the kids are there, and that's it. You just see that happen, and then the next thing that gets addressed. And granted, just like you said, this tie ends to everywhere. But the next thing you see in this series is just them hanging out there in the room and the kids collaring on the floor. I'm like, okay, well, I guess it wasn't that bad. That's one of my... That takes me back to 90s Marvel, where you had to have, or just comics in general, 90s comics in general, where you had to have all the Superman titles to follow one story. And that almost kind of feels like what you have here. And we've said meat on the bones a couple times already there, Evan. They all went to the negative zone.
Yeah, there was like a 3-issue tie-in. I forget who was writing Fantastic Four at the time, but that in a lot of Marvel's events, still to this day, you'll have the comics that are branded with the event logo or whatever and tie in, and then you'll have the comics that just go on and do whatever the heck they want. And there's like Spider-Man Secret Invasion Civil War Fest or whatever, that's a limited series that tells their part of the story while they go on and do their own thing. And it's just weird. There's some stories that tie in, and there's others that they just have this special story, but it doesn't reflect the main book.
Yeah, 1.4 issue 1.4 AU.
Yes.
It's like, oh, geez, criminy. I don't want to start adding decimals to my. Where am I supposed to put that in my comics?
A lot of those
between 1.3 AU and 1.5 A to Z.
Thank you very much, Evan. Go ahead, Chris.
I was gonna say in the those 90s comics you were talking about, and going back to the 80s, 70s, whatever, there would be stuff that you weren't familiar with, but maybe clunkily through the dialogue, they would let you know what you're supposed to know to kind of catch you up, or through captions or something. But in this, like, there's nothing. Like, if you didn't read it, just keep going. Just try and keep up with the flow of the story.
Yeah, it's just like, okay, well, I guess everything's okay. I got to leave it at that. And if I want to know, got to go find that limited series. Okay, Evan, please, sir, you have the floor here on these last 2 issues, then we'll get into final thoughts with everybody.
The tie-in that built up to Norman taking out the Skrull Queen, rather bizarre, but you have Deadpool to thank for that. They launched a new Deadpool series, and the first 3 or 4 issues was Deadpool trying to infiltrate the Skrulls, and Nick Fury had hired him to figure out how to stop the Skrulls.
I think I've read this series. Go ahead.
And I mean, there was a whole thing where they tried to duplicate Deadpool's powers, and it didn't work. The payoff, I'm doing air quotes that you guys can't see, is Deadpool gets the information, if I remember correctly, on how to kill a Skrull Queen, which I'm not sure if they did it in that series or if they referenced it later, was literally shoot her in the head. But whatever the secret info that he's supposed to send to Nick Fury gets intercepted by Norman Osborn. And then so Osborn supposedly uses that knowledge, but again, shoot her in the head, which works on zombies, regular people, everybody. So at some point there was, a tongue-in-cheek thing referencing that like that's the Skrull Queen's weakness. But yeah, so you have Deadpool to thank for Norman Osborn being in charge. Well, again, there's more of that, to be a broken record, more of the everybody, let's all kill us some Skrulls. I mean, like Bullseye killing Skrulls. Well, sure, Bullseye kills people just for the heck of it. And there's even in issue 8, Tony says, keep the casualties light. I want prisoners. But again, we're all going to be wringing our hands when Vision's arm falls off, And
then, there's Skrull ships getting destroyed in midair. Somebody shot through a ship, if I remember correctly. And I was like, we're not keeping the casualties light here at all. They fly up and they wreck stuff. I mean, bodies are floating in space. I'm looking at I'm looking at it right now.
Yeah. And I understand it's war. I get that, but it's just the fact that nobody even, again, until Ryan North did it 11 years later in Squirrel Girl, nobody said, hey, didn't we go a little nuts on the Skrulls?
Yeah.
There was some resonance to having a founding Avenger go out, even if it was the Wasp, which I also think I kind of cynically thought, well, sometimes people don't know what to do with the Wasp. So one of the things I thought was cool that was in the tie-ins that we hadn't touched on, because Hank Pym always gets a bad rap, often deservedly so, but they did 2 issues about replacing him in the tie-ins, and one of them, the Skrull flipped out, and because it had so many of Hank Pym's traits, traits, it was like, guys, we can't do this. It's not going to work. And he was, trying to call off the invasion. It turned out they had like 3 or 4 Skrulls they had to send to replace Hank Pym because he kept resisting the
really?
Hank Pym part of the programming. So yeah, they tried to make Hank a bit of a hero in that, contrary to what a lot of people tend to think of him as. Yeah, other than that, you had the setup for Dark Reign.
Real quick, so I keep saying Siege. Am I wrong, or does that also follow
you're right. It just Dark Reign leads into Siege.
Okay,
Siege was when Norman finally imploded, like everyone knew he would.
Gotcha.
Dark Reign was him trying to be in charge. He actually would form his own team of Avengers.
They were the Dark Avengers, right?
Yeah, that he Ares and Sentry went with them, and then he had a bunch of villains dress up as heroes.
Yep, I remember that. There's Dark Wolverine, and that's the only one I can remember off the top of my head.
Moonstone was Ms. Marvel. Venom was the new Spider-Man, and then they I think they made Novar, Marvel Boy, that popped up in here.
Oh yeah, I didn't even bring him up. He was an interesting character.
They made him the new Captain Marvel for a while.
Is this the same Marvel Boy that we just talked about on Avengers Forever from the 50s Avengers?
No.
Okay, all right. So,
I've got that trade. That was one of the few Grant Morrison Marvel series. I have not read it yet, but he's like some sort of alternate reality Kree. You only see it hinted at in Secret Invasion, but in another one of the tie-ins, his encounter with the Skrull, who basically thought it was the original Captain Marvel, kind of turned him around and made him more heroic, and he kind of tried to carry on Marvel's legacy eventually. He would actually join the real Avengers way down the line.
So where do the Avengers go here?
Well, the quote-unquote new Avengers, Luke Cage, Spider-Man, Wolverine and company, Bucky, Cap, and Ms. Marvel and Mockingbird fall in with them. And then there was a new team of Mighty Avengers. Dan Slott actually took that book over. Jarvis and Hank Pym, U.S. Agent.
Oh, yeah.
Always love U.S. Agent.
Oh, yeah.
And Hercules, Scarlet Witch, and a few others. They formed that team and got into a few weird adventures there. Hank actually started calling himself the Wasp because he was like, you know what? I need a 6th identity. And
what the hell? All right.
Please tell me he tootsied it up. Like he walked around in like ball gowns and
No, sadly he did not, but there was in the initiative there was this really awkward scene where he's having dinner with Janet, who's dead, but it's Jocasta, the one of the lady robots Ultron made, based on the Wasp. And at one point the Wasp asks him, so were you a Skrull when you hit me? And he's like, no, that was me.
Did they ever bring the Wasp back to life?
Yes.
Because I know there's a trade.
I mean, was that a question that really had to be asked?
Well, no, I'm dumb. I know I took my daughter to go see Ant-Man and the Wasp when that first came out, and I took her to the comic book store because I'm forcing comics down her throat. Get it? And
it's good parenting.
Thank you. I told her, pick anything you want, and I said, if you're interested in the Wasp, let's go see if she has her own trade. And lo and behold, she did. But I wasn't sure if that was before or after this event took place.
They brought the Wasp back kind of in Bendis's Avengers Swan Song after they relaunched him for the 18th time in the Heroic Age. They found her right in Central Park. She had shrunk down and gone into the microverse, or as the kids are calling it because of the movies, the Quantum Realm. Actually, when Michelle Pfeiffer, year-old spoiler alert, when Michelle Pfeiffer shows up in Ant-Man and the Wasp, that the outfit she has on is pretty reminiscent of what Janet was wearing when she came back in the comics.
Oh, okay. All right.
Secret Invasion showed us they're not even going to let Mockingbird stay dead.
Yeah.
So obviously, everyone.
And I did roll my eyes, but they've done some cool stuff with Mockingbird since then.
Sure. Absolutely. Last year, we asked her about her feminist agenda.
Indeed, we did. Indeed, we did.
That's how Alexis Hannah became part of the podcast, as a matter of fact. I literally want to make a gimmick out of National Women's Day, so we're going to do the Mockingbird trade where she's wearing a t-shirt that says, ask me about my feminist agenda. Oh, we need a girl for this. Here, I know one.
I don't know if anybody's mentioned it, maybe when I wasn't on, but I want to shout out Gabrielle Delato, I think, the cover artist for this.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, most of the covers are great, but especially the Skrull cover and which is number 5, and number 7, the Wolverine with the scroll of the Spider-Man scroll leaping over top of him. Those are really amazing.
I don't know if he did on a lot of the Avengers tie-ins. I forget who did those covers, but in those tie-in issues, a lot of them were it was Marco. I don't even know how to Djurjevic,
Chiquetto or whatever.
Yeah,
no, I guess not.
DJEVIC. But in those Avengers, in Mighty and New Avengers, it was famous Avengers covers that were scrollified. So, like the issue where Nick Fury's recruiting the Secret Warriors, they have the I think it was from the original Avengers 16, where you got Captain America and all the possible members, and Cap, and all the heroes in the background are Skrulls, and it's those painted covers, and they've got the one like the first appearance of the Vision, where the Vision is a Skrull looming over the Avengers. So that was, in a couple cases, those covers were better than the actual fill-ins. Most of them were pretty good. There was one where they expanded Captain Marvel Skrull attacking the Skrull Armada into like an entire issue, and I didn't really get that, but yeah, those covers, you gotta go check them out, because it's just cool to see some of those. It's like when they did the Marvel Zombies and zombified a bunch of classic covers, but they scrollified these.
All right, any other tidbits of information there, Evan?
No, that's about all I got. Unless you want me to spoil how they get the baby back.
Well, yeah, tell us, because I don't think we're going to be reading it anytime soon.
That was bugging the fire out of me. I'm like, I read those issues, and they got Reed Richards to help him, and eventually Luke Cage had to go up to Norman Osborn and say, I want my kid back, and Osborn says, okay, you sign up with my Avengers and we'll find her. Cage agrees, and by golly, they track her down, get her back from Skrull Jarvis.
Did they kill him?
Yeah, Bullseye shoots him in the head. I mean, Cage said, you know what, you give me my kid, you walk, I don't care, I just want my kid back. And then Bullseye shot him. They go back to Avengers Tower, and Osborn's gloating and saying like, welcome to the Avengers, and Cage goes, I'm not going to work for you, I just wanted my kid back. And then he like trashes the room with the Wrecker's crowbar and jumps out of the building.
Nice. Boy, that's a villain group I want to see in a Marvel movie, is the Wrecking Crew.
The Wrecking Crew?
Yes.
I'm surprised they haven't been. I mean, every superhero or team, they're like, hey, we need some thuggish guys. How about the Wrecking Crew? I mean, I don't think they stay in jail long, because they're like, you know what, we need to have some superheroes practice. Let's just release the Wrecking Crew.
I think they were typically a Thor enemy, and they immediately went cosmic with Thor. So it's like, he doesn't have time to be hitting a guy. He doesn't have time to be fighting a guy with a magic crowbar. He's got dark elves to beat up.
Although I do have a friend who swears up and down that the Wrecking Crew would make a fantastic subject of a musical. And like, I think he's joking, but I also am pretty sure he's got half a script written.
There's a Terminator musical, and a Rocky musical, and a Spider-Man musical, and a Cats musical.
There's
the longest
no
show on Broadway.
Yeah, I was going to say, there's no reason not to have a Wrecking Crew musical.
Yeah, it would be called Wreck with an exclamation point.
I watched the Terminator 2 rock opera once, and I was not unhappy that I did.
All right. Well, let's go ahead. We'll get into final thoughts. Round robin. Here we go. Mark Radulich. Man, you were impressed, right? You had a good time reading this, right?
I was awake. Yeah, no, I really liked it. It was a simple enough story. Maybe 6 issues, not 8 issues. Other than that, just fine. I really liked it. No complaints for me.
All right, very good. It was kind of a breath of fresh air after the largeness, the girth of Avengers Forever. Nice to kind of hop right into this.
As I was rereading this for the first time pretty much since it came out, I was surprised at how much I disliked it as I was going through the first couple issues. Not to say that I hate it. I'm going to be a little more harder on it than you guys, because I know you guys all liked it. So I'll be the contrarian, as I said earlier. Bendis, I think he comes up with great story ideas. There's some back matter material in some of these issues with Joe Quesada talking about how Bendis had been planting the seeds for this for years, and this was the payoff. And it was a great idea, and the plot for this series is really really interesting, and I just have a problem with some of the execution. But yeah, Bendis, like his dialogue kind of gets on my nerves a lot of times, a little pithy back and forth. You know, it's exemplified in this series with Maria Hill's little "I'm going to get a T-shirt made" speech, and it's like, we get it, man, get on with it. She's clever, okay, but this story also has a lot of great big moments, like the return of Thor. Whenever Fury shows up with the Secret Warriors, the Super Skrulls landing, even Clint taking up the bow and arrow after he'd been Ronin for who knows how long. A lot of really cool moments. The action sequences are amazing, and it sets up some really cool stuff with Dark Reign. I don't like the fact that it sets it up in a way that makes you feel like this is not a complete story. It's just a setup for some bigger story down the line. And I don't think it reads that well in retrospect if you're not someone who was reading Marvel Comics in 2008. So anyway, those are my criticisms. I still kind of liked it. I think it's the worst of those mid-2000s events of House of M, Civil War, Siege, whatever else. I think this is probably the weakest one, but it's definitely worth reading because it is a lot of fun. It's like a big action epic.
Well, it's funny you say that, and I didn't mean to interrupt you. But the rumor has it that that the next big Marvel Cinematic Universe crossover event, like they just basically did the Infinity
Saga,
that the next one is going to be Secret Invasion, Secret
Empire, Secret Invasion.
It really makes sense with Captain Marvel, and like, you know, I'm sure everybody knows there's that scene where Talos, is that the Skrull's name?
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
Captain Marvel, where he says cover her eyes to his wife when he starts shooting the Kree soldiers, but the wife like doesn't, and the girl sees it, and she has this like look of elation on her face of like, hey, he's killing these people. I just think that's going to end up leading to, I was thinking more of like that's going to lead to the next Captain Marvel movie. She's probably I assume his daughter's going to end up being a bad guy somehow or something. But
okay, I want to pause real quick before we go to Evan here. Now, Mark, you said it's a rumor that might be the next big arc. But if you could pick an arc for them to go to, would Secret Invasion be it, or would you pick something different, Mark?
World War Hulk. No.
Fucking course.
No. All right. If you're asking just like if I work for Kevin Feige and he's like, all right, we've done the Infinity Saga, pick something, Secret Wars or whatever.
Movies? How many movies was that?
23. 22. Yeah.
Jeez. Okay, so you got 22 movies you got to subtly build an arc with.
Honestly, I was thinking about this today. Why can't they take 22 movies to build up to Galactus?
Mm-hmm. It's been done, though. I mean, you're redoing...
Not the way they did it.
It's already been touched on.
I think they already opened the door for Galactus.
They've not done Galactus the way it's obviously done in the comic book. Because here's the thing. Because here's what I would do, and I'm going to take a little piece of a podcast that I did a little ways back when the whole Fox thing was happening, the whole Disney Fox thing, where I pitched like how they could bring the Fantastic Four back to the Marvel Cinematic Universe. I would like to see them build up, slowly build up to Galactus coming to Earth. But when he gets to Earth, do the Fantastic Four issue where like the Avengers showed up and took him down with the Fantastic Four, and then right before they were going to kill him, Reed stops them and says, No. What I'm realizing is that he's a part of the circle of life and a part of the natural course. I'm not going to do a Lion King joke. I wanted to, but I stopped myself.
Nice restraint, sir. That CPAP's working.
No, I did enough of that when discussing Black Panther in our last Marvel podcast.
Phase 3.
You should see what I said about the Soul Gem. But anyway, so in that issue, Reed says like killing Galactus is the wrong move. He's a part of the natural course of the universe. He is a force of nature, not a malevolent force. So they let him live, and the next thing you know, Reed is carted off across the cosmos to, and he's tried. It's we discussed this last year. It was the trial of Galactus. That's what set the whole thing up. I want to see a movie version of all that. Like, I would like the next event to be the coming of Galactus. They take him down and then let it end the same way that Reed lets him go. And then the next Fantastic Four movie is Fantastic Four, the trial of Reed Richards, or the trial of Galactus, however you like it.
Okay. All right, Chris, that same question. Why don't you give it a shot? What would you build the next 22 movies up to?
That's a great question, because even Galactus, like, it's not as bad as what Thanos was going to do.
Eating the Earth like Unicron?
Well, I mean, Thanos was going to exterminate all life in the universe.
Theoretically, so could Galactus, only he'd get it all.
Well, Galactus couldn't do it with a snap of his fingers, though.
No, he would kind of treat it like a buffet lunch.
Sure. Yeah, I get that Galactus is about as big of a threat as there is, but it just seems to me like one of the few, I wouldn't even call it a problem, but one of the issues with Endgame is like, where do you go from here? It's almost like they broke it. Like, there's no threat that's going to come close to what they've already.
I've got one.
But as far as what I would do next, I think that the time travel. I mentioned this during the Avengers Forever pod. I think the time travel stuff opens the door for Kang the Conqueror. I think that's a genie that was let out when they started using time travel, and it's going to come back to bite them. And I think, other than Thanos, which you could argue that Thanos isn't really an Avengers villain in the comics, he's just a villain for the Marvel Universe. But Kang is like the ultimate Avengers villain. So I want to see, that's where I would like to see them take the movies. And as far as like Galactus, and you mentioned last week Doctor Doom, those are great. For one thing, Doom isn't really a match for the Avengers, I don't think, as great of a villain as he is. He's a Fantastic Four villain, and using Doom and Galactus in the Fantastic Four film franchise, leading into the next big like crossover movie, is a cool idea. But as far as like just what they're doing with the Avengers, I think Kang is the way to go.
Well, can we compromise and maybe Kang is the Ultron of Phase 4, 5, and 6? You know, you know what I mean? Like,
yeah.
Why can't Kang be the next one or two Avengers movies, but still end on Galactus?
Yeah,
mid-level boss.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, he's definitely not the threat that Galactus is. Okay. So that would be cool. But I'm excited to see what happens either way.
All right, now, Evan, you've heard these boys throw their ideas out there. What 22 movies? What's your arc here for the Marvel Cinematic U?
First, I was going to go with the Abundant Glove, which is the lesser known companion piece to the Howard the Duck by Chip Zdarsky. It's only 5 gems: compassion, laughter, respect, dance, and a second dance gem.
Is that a real thing?
Yeah. Chip Zdarsky, Howard the Duck Hunt, Volume 0.
Can we get you to pitch that to Kevin Feige as a Howard the Duck movie?
Well, I think he's already got Kevin Smith working on that.
No, fuck Kevin Smith. He's a hack.
Well, I mean, yeah, if he doesn't want to, I mean, I have a tweet where Chip Zdarsky admits he's my best friend. So
okay,
print that out and frame it.
I'm gonna need you to get on. I've never been so serious. I need you on Twitter right now, tweeting Chip Zdarsky and Kevin Feige and going, after the stupid animated thing is done, Howard the Duck movie with this abundance mitt or whatever you just called it.
Abundant Glove. Okay, I'll get on that. Yeah, no, actually, Chip Zdarsky, hilarious. He posted a couple things and I commented, and he liked a couple of my replies, and I said, "Oh my gosh, I'm new to social media. Does this mean we're best friends?" And he tweets back, "Yeah, probably." So we're tight.
I will produce this movie. I will find funding for you. Get it done.
Okay. All right. If they don't go with the Abundant Glove, I was trying to think. I could see Secret Invasion. I know people talk about Secret Wars, but my gosh, where would you go from there?
I was like, what would you do? How do you get the Beyonder to work on screen?
You give him a perm and make sure the top 3 buttons are undone. I mean that's Daniel Day-Lewis, I think.
And he's always listening to Staying Alive whenever he's on screen.
Oh, exactly. But yeah, when Chris was talking about Kang, it actually got me thinking. Friend of the podcast, Kurt Busiek, did wrapped up his Avengers run with a phenomenal story where Kang took over the world. Yeah, and I mean, you had the Avengers were an underground group at that point. I mean, this story went on for over a year and tied together so many things. So if you're talking about something that wouldn't be just like Infinity War and Endgame, but could span a couple of movies and pull together everybody, I think it was called like the Kang Dynasty, maybe.
That sounds.
That would be be a heck of a way to go.
Well, okay, so people are scoffing at Secret Wars?
No,
Because-
people are saying Secret Wars could be next, especially if they bring in the X-Men, and I'm just saying
That's where I'm
after
going.
Secret Wars, where do you go?
We have to bring all the properties in, and
You don't have to bring in X-Men.
you have to. You gotta bring.
We've already had the Inhumans, Mutants Light.
Well, they're recasting. They're going to recast all those roles. Like Dark Phoenix is the end of that group of characters,
Right.
that group of actors. I mean, theoretically, if you wanted to do Secret Wars, you could say in Marvel 2-1 Bat Signal, there lives the X-Men, and that universe is collapsing into the 616, and voila, Lobster. But
Man,
Possible.
well, it's going to be an interesting. I mean,
I'm kind of fucking over the X-Men. Like, get the Fantastic Four right, okay? We've had 87 X-Men movies. They all had Wolverine in it. Can we just be done with this for a while? Put it to bed for a bit and maybe rehabilitate the poor Fantastic Four. Can we do that?
I'm eager to see a Marvel Studios X-Men, just because I don't think. I mean, the X-Men movies are real hit or miss. I think there are like 3 or 4 like great ones, and then most of the others are pretty bad. But they're not really the X-Men. They're not the X-Men from the comics. And I thought that the first couple X-Men and X2 for the version of comic book movies that we were getting at that time were a really great version of the X-Men. But
the only way I want to see the X-Men is if they do House of M, but they do it in reverse, and Scarlet Witch goes crazy and says all the mutants, and then they all. But it's gotta be like it's gotta be the actors now that were in the original X-Men movie.
Yeah.
I want to see Halle Berry, who's decided not to do an accent anymore. I want to see Patrick Stewart. I want to see all of them.
I just want to see Dazzler and Maggot. And Brew. We gotta have Brew.
Brew. Okay, I know Maggot. I know Dazzler. What is Brew?
Oh man, Wolverine and the X-Men, the comic that got me back into X-Men comics, where Wolverine decided to be the headmaster of the school because who's the worst possible headmaster for a school? And one of the students was a Brood kid who was not feral most of the time and didn't want to possess people, was just this really smart, really personable kid who occasionally went crazy and bit people.
Okay.
Have you heard my pitch for a Dazzler show starring Taylor Swift?
Oh my
No,
God.
but I like it. I'm intrigued. I'm a person that unironically likes Dazzler.
No, I love Dazzler. I think they've really been missing out. There's money on the table, like a Fox TV show where you have a superhero who's also a pop star. How the fuck has this not been on television yet?
It actually, when they created Dazzler, there was supposed to be a movie. I think Daryl Hannah was supposed to play Dazzler. That was the original plan.
Oh wow.
Only if she does it with the fishtail.
But you know, Dazzler is going to be on Hulu too.
Yes.
Oh, that's right. Yeah.
Like Dazzler and somebody, isn't it?
Tigra.
Yeah.
That's so weird. It is, isn't it? I mean, it's almost like if we're going to do that, we might as well just do Rick Jones and the Supreme Intelligence. That's just the next step.
Yeah, why haven't we got? Well, we got Rick Jones a little bit in Hulk, but no Rick Jones.
Evan, you got your final thoughts here on Secret Invasion. You have the floor, sir, and we'll get into plugs. What's your thoughts, man?
Wait, were we talking about Secret Invasion?
I thought we were pitching the
Are we still in this? Are we still in the summary section?
Yeah. No, I mean, I really enjoyed it when it came out, and it helped that I was following so many of the comics that tied in with it. I mean, they had a really awesome atmosphere going into it, and so when I was reading that and reading all the tie-ins, I didn't notice the lulls in the main story, and reading it by itself, I did feel that, but so the execution wasn't perfect, but I mean it tied so many things together and worked a lot better than all the crossovers do, I think. But again, that's with reading everything else or a lot of it. I enjoyed going back and reading it, even if you could kind of see parts that didn't hold up as well when you come at it from another angle. And I mean, it's I came of comics age, when we spent 20 years wondering who the third Summers brother was, and then no one cared when they revealed it. So I mean, New Avengers #1, that tied directly into Secret Invasion. It was the Skrulls that pulled the strings that made the New Avengers come together, even though they didn't mean for it to. Yeah, it was a good payoff. It was a cool concept, and I got to see Howard the Duck and Annex.
All right. Exciting. Very good. Well, yeah, I had a good time, man. I got in here and, I didn't know what to expect. Like I said, this is the first time I read it. So it felt like a nice breezy read. It kept me interested. I wasn't taken out by too many of the things that I couldn't figure out. I just one of those things where I accept what's kind of happened here and I'll move on. So I had a good time. But either way, I had an absolute blast talking about this 8-issue series with you guys. So I think we'll go ahead and get into plugs here. So I'm going to start with Evan here. Evan, sir, I know you do a few things out there in the journalism world. Why don't you go ahead and lay it on us here? What would you like to plug, sir?
Let's see. Well, I do write a column monthly for Graffiti, West Virginia Entertainment Magazine, about comics. My most recent ones were the 10 most unlikely Avengers, since we have Savage Avengers featuring the Punisher and Conan the Barbarian somehow coming out next month.
Yeah, that's right. It's right around the corner.
Wait, what?
I did offer some thoughts that I completely forgot about in another column on where Marvel could go next. It would have been relevant to bring up then. I also do a column called Back Issues because I found the name source material had been taken, letting folks know where some of the movies and TV shows that originated in comics come from and what they looked like back then. At some point I wrote and will continue to write at some point in the future a webcomic called Support Group about a support group for people with lame superpowers when your origin doesn't turn out the way they show it in the comics.
That's right. All right, Chris Armstrong, you have some plugs to do, sir. Please.
Sure. You can find me on Twitter at BrodyMan34. Last week, I said I was going to have something on UnspokenDecade.com by the time the Avengers Forever pod dropped, and that was a lie. Because although I'm done with it, Dean said it wasn't going to go up on the site until Wednesday. But by the time this comes out, I'll have my top 10 moments from the Infinity Gauntlet on the UnspokenDecade.com. It's a 90s fan site.
That is going to be a blast to read, dude. Top 10 moments from the Infinity Gauntlet?
Well,
that sounds like a lot of fun. All right. Anything else?
That's it.
All right. Mark Radulich, the schedule, sir.
Okay, well, as I said before, it's a Marvel event month here in the month of May, where we bring the flowers. Next week is Civil War II, then Blood Ties, then World War Hulk. In the meantime, in between time, last week on the Radulich Broadcasting Network, we reviewed Endgame. Apparently, there's going to be about 500 people on this podcast, so that's good. Yes. After I told Alexis and Robert, hey, no shenanigans, I have a biopsy the next day. So, it's good that, we have all these people on.
Oh, we're going to have to do a 2-parter, 6 hours, Mark Radulich.
Yeah. This is the podcast that never ends, never ends, never ends. This is the podcast that never ends.
Wonderful.
There was no Metal Hammer of Doom last week, but Jesse and I reviewed the Orville, and I was either happy or sad, depending on how the biopsy went. Actually, no. I won't get the results until this week.
Okay.
Time travel. On May, I'm just going to say the dates then. On May 2nd, Alexis Hannah made another appearance on the Radulich Broadcasting Network where we discussed part 2 of the chilling adventures of Sabrina, otherwise known as Down with Misogyny. You'll know what that means if you've seen the episodes. On the 4th of May, either I reviewed I did commentary for Canelo versus Daniel Jacobs on DAZN, or I was at a Kentucky Derby party all night long and I never made it. So one of those two things happened. This week, damn you, Jesse, for making these things a week back and screwing up my plugs.
Editing! Yay!
This week, we've got Cobra Kai Season 2.
Oh my gosh, I just finished it tonight.
You mean you finished it last week?
I have just finished it last week. It was amazing.
On the Metal Hammer of Doom, we've got Battle Beast, No More Hollywood Endings. And then Alexis Hannah will be back for another TV party, She-Ra Season 2.
All right, very good.
So that's what's going on. I can't do any more plugs. My nose is about to bleed.
All right. Well, ladies and gentlemen, this has been a blast. We've gone pretty long here. This has been a long episode. It'll be a lot of editing.
I wanted to be asleep an hour ago.
I kind of figured. That's all right, though, because we have brought to you Secret Invasion. We look forward to the next big Marvel event we're going to be covering next week. So stay tuned, ladies and gentlemen. For Evan Bevins, for Chris Armstrong, for Mark Radulich, I'm Jesse Starcher. This has been the Source Material Comics Podcast. We'll be talking to you soon. Have a good one. Bye-bye. Thank you all for joining us. Make sure to give that Radulich in Broadcasting Facebook page a like to stay up on top of all the great podcasts we have to offer. We are at home on Spreaker, but you can also find us on iTunes, Stitcher, TuneIn Radio, and recently we have hit the air on Spotify. Find your favorite podcast platform and type in RADULICH to subscribe for some great content. If you enjoyed this show, please feel free to share and spread the word. And as always, we appreciate any feedback and look forward to entertaining you again soon.
You're going to hit record like Hank Pym hits Janet?
Smack it. Flip it, rub it down. Oh, no!
Oh, no! How deep is your love?
Okay.
Is it bread and water time?
It'll be edited out. But go ahead.
You'll come up with a funny thing to do with sound effects, I'm sure.
I'm sure I will, as a matter of fact.
I wasn't sleeping. I was doing cocaine.
Oh, okay. Even better. Wonderful.
That's not fridging.
That's not. She is making the sacrifice. I don't think Kyle Rayner's girlfriend put herself in that fridge.
I was like, Marvel's woke.
And then, should we talk about the time Indiana Jones fridged himself?
Oh.
It's also the chorus of a Goldfinger song called Mabel. Her eyes were hazel, her name was Mabel, ... She's the bomb.
I think this was a crisscross off their second album, The Bomb. Yeah. Take that.
I think I was going to get a Chris Cross reference tonight.
I'm just thinking of the guy that drew Captain Marvel for Peter David, so Chris Cross.
I feel like they missed an opportunity with Janet's death for somebody to yell out, "Damn it, Janet."
Damn it, Janet.
That's a Rocky Horror Picture Show.
Oh, I've never seen that.
There's a shock.
So
she gets too big for her fridges.
Oh my.
Post-Secret Empire Spider-Man, when Peter Parker, when his company collapsed and he and Mockingbird were dating, he was sleeping on her couch, and there's a scene where he wakes up and he's wearing the Ask Me About My Feminist Agenda shirt.
I'm going to give that tattoo to my...
I'm worried about the people that are going to ask you about it then. I mean, they would have had to have seen it.
Weird.
I'm hoping they get Tracy Lords to play Dazzler, and she sings the song...
What happened to Taylor Swift? Brother Voodoo. Or possibly Dr. Voodoo.
All right.
I don't know the status of his licensure at this point.
So I said, before we can get started, before I can allow you to beat the shit out of each other, as is the tradition in our house.
What's your air score going to be tonight?
It was 100 today.
Is that the most you can get?
Yes.
Is that the most? Good job.
Yeah, I won breathing.
They need to give you a trophy.
Summertime tips and fun facts from Paul, Kristen, and Dexter at Total Wine & More.
For grilled wings, bring on the barbecue sauce. Pair with Syrah to make your taste buds hot.
It's a great time of year for strawberries in a salad. Enjoy with a crisp cider for a perfect pairing.
Nothing beats recommending a great wine. And with our extensive selection, I can help find the perfect one for your budget.
Whether you're hosting or just bringing the wine, Total Wine & More has you covered with 8,000 wines, 3,000 spirits, and 2,500 beers at always low prices. Cheers!
Capital One knows life doesn't alert you about your credit card.
Pitch hitting, the catcher, number 2. Also, Karen in row J eating the hot dog. Did you mean to tip 167% yesterday at Le Cafe restaurant? Just checking.
So, meet Eno, the Capital One assistant that catches things that might look wrong, like over-tipping, then sends an alert to your phone and helps you fix it. Eno, another way Capital One is watching out for your money when you're not. Capital One, what's in your wallet? See CapitalOne.com for details. Limitations apply.